Yeah, more people need to know about these. I think mulitas are the most overlooked item at a taqueria. They're not as crushable as a plate of tacos, and they're not as flashy as, let's say, like a quesadilla would maybe be. But I think people need to know about the joy that is the mulita. Mulitas are these really delicious layered corn tortillas with meat, beans, cheese, and then you can put toppings on them. Today, I'm gonna show you a really delicious recipe for homemade chorizo mulitas that are gonna capture all of that amazing taqueria flavor. To maximize the spiced, porky goodness of the chorizo, we're gonna start by making a chili sauce or adobo that will transform ground pork into something special. Start by removing the seeds from 6 guajillo chilies, 1 ancho chili, and 2 arbols. The guajillos bring color and a nice tangy heat. The ancho brings smoky sweetness and depth, and the arbols are there pretty much for their heat. Now, most recipes I see include toasting the chilies, but as I covered in the birria video, I think toasting ends up opening the chilies up to bitterness that may not be there otherwise. The pork's gonna be cooked until it's nice and crispy anyways, so the chilies are gonna get that heat. For that reason, I like to just soak the chilies in boiling water for 20 minutes or until softened. Once the chilies had softened, blend them with 6 cloves of garlic, 3 grams of cumin seed, 1 gram of dried oregano, 3 grams of smoked paprika, 1 gram of ground cinnamon, and then basically 0.75 grams or 1/4 of a teaspoon of coriander, nutmeg, ginger, clove. And then we're gonna add a little pinch of sugar, probably like 1/2 gram or so. Think of this as like 1/4 of a teaspoon as well. And then 7.5 grams of salt, and then 50 grams of apple cider vinegar. Use a little bit of clean water to help create a smooth paste if you need it. If your blender isn't great at making things smooth, you can totally strain this, but I think it's better with the sauce fully broken down in the blender. You get a little bit more flavor having those solids in the mix. For the ground pork itself, we just need 1 pound or about 450 grams of grocery store ground pork. This is usually somewhere around 80-20, 70-30 or so, which is great for this use. I like my chorizo a little bit fattier. It reminds me of those like Go-Gurt tubes you can get from the grocery store. If you want leaner, you could totally go that way, but leaner gets you a little bit more of like a gritty texture. The fat is really, really important to this. In my testing, I even tried it with ground pork belly. Like I took pork belly and ground it in a food processor. It was super, super tasty. It just was very fatty, probably too fatty. That's why I'm doing this with just ground pork. Mix the adobo into your pork with your hands or a spoon until completely combined, and you start to see the fat creating strands. This fat stranding actually creates a cohesive sausage texture rather than like a simple ground pork texture, if that makes sense. You see this cohesive spiced chorizo? This is going to be so, so delicious when we fry it up. Set this in the fridge to chill for a few hours or overnight if you got the time. That's just gonna make sure that all of those chilies permeate through the pork. I was inspired to make this recipe by a taqueria in Dallas called Del Sur. It's still one of my all-time favorite taquerias. And they had mulitas on the menu and I never had them before. And they were the most like dressed up I'd ever seen them. Like nowadays I go and get mulitas and they're usually just like 2 corn tortillas, basically like a quesadilla with corn tortillas. These were like special plated mulitas. And so that's what I want to show to you. I want to make sure that these are nice and plated and we're going to top them beautifully. And I think that makes them a little bit more special than just the standard like 2 tortillas and meat and cheese and beans in the middle. For really special mulitas, we need some tasty spicy salsa and a little bean action. There are a couple of different ways to make mulitas, but I think of them as meat, beans, and cheese between 2 toasted corn tortillas. The magic really happens when the toasted tortillas soak up all the fat from the chorizo and the bean juice. The top tortilla stays kind of crunchy and it's gonna be lashed with this Morita Salsa that we're gonna make and maybe a little crema. The salsa starts with 12 tomatillos that are gonna get charred and delicious in the broiler. So remove the papery cover from the tomatillos and then wash them to get rid of that like sticky layer that's in between the paper and the vegetable itself. Place these on a sheet tray that can ride under the broiler until they've achieved some nice color. Keep an eye on them though. You want these to blacken but not burn. They're gonna begin to split, so remove them before they lose too much moisture. While doing this, we can remove the seeds from 3 Morita chilies, which are these really nice, spicy, dried red jalapenos. They're decently spicy, not crazy hot, but 3 is gonna be enough to give the salsa a good flavor, and it's not gonna be too hot with the chilies that are in the chorizo. Toast these in a dry, hot pan for around 30 seconds or so, and then cover them with boiling water. Let these steep for 20 minutes so they can soften up nicely. After the 20 minutes is up, process these with half a white onion and 3 cloves of garlic. To make sure that this incorporates into the tomatillos, get this pretty smooth now. You're gonna get little chunks of onion, and I think that's good for texture, but we don't wanna blend this too much with the tomatillos. We wanna have the option to go as chunky or as smooth as we'd like. My secret to really tasty salsa is salt. Lots of it. Salsa is just a lot of vegetable mass, and so for it to taste good, it needs enough salt. If you've had salsa that doesn't taste right, that's probably why. Leave it chunky or go smooth. The choice is really up to you. For me, I left this in a place where I could spoon it out and it would be really, really nice and textured, but not too smooth. Chill this in the fridge until we're ready to go. This is really, really good with a chip, by the way. If you're just looking for a good salsa to snack on, this is a good one. The last important component is gonna be our beans. I know that dried beans are probably better in some ways, but I always have a can of pinto beans on hand for this exact reason. I just really can't seem to shake the convenience of it. To get really good pinto beans, we can start with some fresh aromatics though. Dice a small yellow onion along with a jalapeno. If you got a medium one, go half of the yellow onion. I'll let you pick your poison on if you want the seeds or not. This jalapeno was like actually legit spicy, so I took the seeds out. Mince a clove of garlic and put that in with the vegetables, and let's get over to the stove. In a pot with a lid, heat a little olive oil over medium and then get the onion, garlic, and jalapeno in. Season this with salt now and let these vegetables saute until nicely softened. At this point, add cumin, coriander, black pepper, and a little chili powder for good measure. Let these cook in the hot oil until nice and fragrant. I think that's important to like wake up the spices so they're not just that dried, powdery spice taste. Add in a can of dried pinto beans and then just fill the can up again with water and add that in as well. To get seasoning, I like to add a bunch of chicken powder here. It adds a lot of salt and MSG. And we're gonna bring this to a simmer and cover it so the beans can kind of have like a hot tub party in the broth. I am like the biggest fan of beans. I think beans are so good in every form. Make more beans, people. Bringing back the bean boy. So we've talked enough, let's fry up some chorizo. This pork has quite a bit of water in it from the vinegar, from the meat itself, and from any water we added to blend it smoothly, and we need to cook that off. So get a wide skillet heating over medium-high. Once your pan's hot, plop in that chorizo. Like I said, there's a lot of water here, so the pan is gonna drop in temperature rapidly. Spread this into a layer and let the water start to cook out. You're gonna see a lot of bubbling, and that's the water boiling off. And then the pan's gonna begin to dry out, and the fat is gonna come out, and then the browning can start to occur. I actually needed to add a little oil. I think my pork was less fatty than usual, so judge that on how you feel your pork is crisping up. If it's not crisping, if it's just sort of sitting in the dry heat, you're definitely gonna wanna add some olive oil. This takes some time, it really does. There's a lot of weight here, there's a lot of water, and the meat needs to become brown. So move it around as it needs, and then you're gonna be rewarded with tasty, brown, crispy, juicy chorizo. This took me about 15 to 20 minutes until I was happy with the cook on it. I had some crispy bits, some juicy bits, and that's just how I like it. I'm just gonna set this over a low burner and bring out a pan to toast the tortillas in. These need 2 stages of cooking. The first is to cook them just so they're pliable, and the second stage is gonna bring a slight crunch to them. Over medium heat, cook the corn tortillas 30 seconds aside for about like 90 seconds in total. I just stack 2 tortillas so they cook faster, and then when I flip them, I flip the top tortilla so the other side is gonna get heat. It, in my opinion, just cooks them a little bit faster if your pan isn't super big to get single layers of tortillas. These don't need a long time. We just want to basically remove the cold edge from the fridge, and the heat is gonna steam them if you put them in like a tinfoil wrapping or a towel while you work through the rest in batches. I think the steaming is key to a well-cooked tortilla, so don't skip it. It's pretty important here. Once the initial cook is done, remove the lid from your beans and just check to make sure if they're covered in broth. If so, turn the heat up and cook the moisture out until they're just peeking out of the liquid. If it's good, just leave it where it is. You just want to be able to see the beans through the liquid. You don't want them swimming in it. Using the same tortilla pan from earlier, add a little olive oil and heat it over medium. Drop in your cooked tortillas, 1 or 2 at a time, depending on the size of your pan, and cook them until slightly crisp but still floppy. You want these to have a little bit of that olive oil from the cook itself on them, because once they go into the broiler, that olive oil is gonna fry up on the top and help make them crunchy. The bottom tortilla is gonna sog up from all the juice, and the top tortilla is gonna get crunchy from the broiler. It's a really nice contrast in textures. The final piece of the puzzle here is gonna be just jack cheese or queso Oaxaco, depending on if you want your cheese to be melty or pulley and stringy. I'm just gonna go with jack today, but I do love that stringy, chewy texture of Oaxacan cheese when I'm in the mood for it. We've got everything ready to go. We've got our chorizo done, we've got our cheese, we've got our beans, and our tortillas are ready. So line a sheet tray with a layer of foil. Whichever tortillas look like they soaked up the most oil, save those for the top. So use the drier ones as the base. Onto that base tortilla, add your chorizo, and then top it with some beans, as well as their juice. I think it's important to have a little bit of that like bean liquid on here too. Top each one with a handful of jack cheese. Top it with your reserved tortilla, and then these can go in the oven and turn the broiler on until the cheese has melted and the top tortillas have taken on a little bit of color. I like to start these in the cold oven, that way you can really monitor the heat. It gives the cheese a little bit more time time to melt before the tortillas on the top get really, really dark. Keep a really, really close eye on these. There's no need to go too far. You don't want these to be hard to cut through. If you go too crunchy, they just get really difficult to cut through, and that's not a good thing. After that, take them out, top them with some crema. I literally just made this by using sour cream and a little bit of lime juice and a little water until it was the texture that I could squeeze it out. Add a little guacamole if you've got it lying around. That's totally okay if not. And then a few cilantro sprigs or microgreens. We literally just had these from Trader Joe's. I'm not really that fancy. Keep that tangy, spicy salsa nearby for whenever you want it. Spoon it on top or just dip your Morita directly into it. These things are way too good. They are the perfect like level of salt and spice and tanginess, and you're getting those like nice textured beans, you're getting crunchy tortilla, you're getting soggy tortilla, you're getting juicy, fatty chorizo. The spices in the chorizo sort of warm your chest from like the cumin and ginger and clove that are in there, but then you're getting like the mouth spiciness from the chilies, and then you're getting tang from the vinegar. Like, this is probably the best chorizo I've ever had. What do you guys get at a taqueria? I'm really actually curious about this. My like ideal perfect taqueria order: a mulita with either carnitas or chorizo, and then a couple tacos with adobada or al pastor. I want a horchata to wash it down, or a pineapple Doritos. That's like top tier order for me. Oh, it's the best. It's the best. Massive shout out to the amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. They are the reason I get to keep making videos like this, so check it out if you really want to support the channel and consider becoming a patron. If you want to just support the channel in other ways, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. That means a ton to me, and it tells YouTube that you want to see more videos like this. If you want something that's a little bit more like good for the soul, go for this chicken noodle recipe that I made last week. It's really delicious and uses a special ingredient that I don't think a lot of people use in their chicken soup. Thanks so much for listening to my ramblings about tacos and Mulitas. Cheers.